Hello students, welcome to the Hindu News Analysis by Baji IAS Academy. So in this session, we will discuss all the important and relevant news articles for UPSC prelims and mains examinations, and they will also helpful for your state PSC examinations. Okay, so before discussing all these articles, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon so that you will get all updates regarding our classes. Okay, so because we are also coming up with new classes and they will be helpful for you. Okay, so from today onwards we will start discussing the previous year questions as well. Okay, so every day I will give a previous year question and you just answer the previous year question in the comment section, and the correct answer I will give in tomorrow's lecture. Okay, so this is with respect to the question is in terms of economy, the visit by foreign nationals to witness the 19th Commonwealth Games in India is amounted to which of the following? Is it amounted to export, B import, C production, D consumption? So this question was asked by UPSC in the year 2011. Okay, so please try to answer this question in the comment section. Okay, so the correct answer I will give in tomorrow's class. Okay, so these are the list of important and relevant news articles for today's discussion. So the first important news article is with today there are two science editorials or two science articles. These articles are important for prelims and mains. The first article is the novel host directed molecules blunt SARS-CoV-2 and influenza virus. Okay, so they are in contrary to the the viral drug, because when drugs are increasingly used, the antimicrobial resistance develops. Okay, however, the host directed molecules is an alternative to the direct drug delivery to treat diseases like SARS-CoV-2 and influenza viruses. The next article is global polio targets set for this year unlikely to be met. Okay, so the fourth article is with respect to the over the top platforms. We have several over the top platforms, but these over the top platforms have been neglecting the IT rules which were mandated in the year 2021. Okay, so they are not keeping these platforms still keep the disabled, or they neglected the disabled people, whether hearing impaired or so other disabled people. And the next article is Himachal Pradesh explores the possibility of growing cannabis because of its industrial and medicinal properties. Himachal Pradesh exploring the possibility of legally cultivating cannabis. Right. So the fifth article is Quad grouping leaders. So they have expressed their deep concern over the consequences of Ukraine war. Now, all the leaders were met on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Okay, they have met on the sidelines of the G7 summit. So already two members are part of the G7 summit, US and Japan. However, Australia and India were the special invitees to the G7 grouping. Now, on the sidelines of the G7 grouping at Hiroshima, the Quad grouping member countries or Quad grouping leaders were also met, and they have discussed a wide ranging issues there itself. And the next article is the center seeks review of the Supreme Court's verdict or Supreme Court's directive on Delhi government powers. So this article also we have been discussing continuously about the tussle between the Delhi government and the union government over the administration or the control of bureaucrats and the civil servants. Okay, now the last article is with respect to a contract, no immunity for president as a contract party. State made contracts with several private entities. Okay, so while a few contracts made in the name of president. So even though the contracts are made in the name of president, they should not violate the statutory laws of the land. So this is a one verdict by the Supreme Court. We will discuss about this. Okay, so this is the first article. So okay, this article is about the host directed therapy. Okay, so this is a novel host directed molecules. They blunt SARS-CoV-2 and influenza viruses. Okay, now what is this host directed therapy? For example, in host directed therapies, this is a novel approach in the field of anti-infectives. Okay, so this will overcome the antimicrobial resistance which is already developed by the viruses to a particular drug. Okay, next, the host directed therapy aims at, or it aims to interfere with the host cell factors. Okay, because the host cell factors are required for pathogens for replication or persistence. So when it comes to viruses cannot live without a biological host. Okay, because they cannot synthesize food or they cannot synthesize energy on their own. They depend on host cells. Okay, so they depend on host cells for their replication and their persistence also. And the host directive therapy or host directed therapy enhances the protective immune responses against a wide variety of pathogens. Okay, and it will reduce the exacerbated inflammation, and it will also balance immune reactivity at sites of pathology. Okay, now we will discuss this article. Indian researchers, for the first time, they able to synthesize small molecules. Okay, so these small molecules can effectively halt the infection that caused by SARS-CoV-2, that is one variety of COVID-19, and also the influenza viruses by targeting the host cells. Okay, so they will target the host cells. For example, drugs. If we have drugs, and drugs specifically target the pathogen, not the cells. Okay, so drugs specifically uh, targets the pathogen. So what happens when pathogens develop the resistance to drugs? Pathogens develop resistance to drugs. So in that case, drugs become ineffective or less effective. Okay, so on the other hand, or in contrary to this, the host directed therapy focuses, or it targets the host cell, not the pathogen. Host cell, not the pathogen. Okay, so it will help the host cell to develop immunity against such pathogens. Even though the pathogen develops resistance, or even though the pathogen evolves, mutates over a period of time, the host cell will be able to, or the host cell will develop the immunity, and that will reduce the effectiveness of the pathogens which cause SARS-CoV-2 and influenza. Now, scientists or the researchers have developed few molecules, and these molecules will help, they can effectively halt the infection, and they target the host cells but not the pathogen. Please remember, on the other hand, drugs target the pathogens. Okay, so in place of antivirals, they directly target the virus. Okay, antivirals are drugs, they directly target the virus. However, the host directed therapy does not target the virus. The host directed therapy target the host cell. Okay. However, as of now, there is no approved directed drugs are available for either SARS-CoV-2 or influenza virus. So we will discuss why till now there is no approved host directed drugs are available for either SARS-CoV-2 or influenza viruses. Okay, so the both cultured cells and animal studies, they are pointing that the small molecules were synthesized, they showed of 95% efficacy. Okay, they showed the 90%, 95% efficacy in halting the infection that caused by SARS-CoV-2 and influenza viruses by the molecules which are developed by the scientists. Okay, so they are 95% effective in halting infection, right? So while antivirals that actually target the virus, they become ineffective. Why they become ineffective? Because once virus develops the resistance, these antivirals becomes inactive. Now, drugs also that target the host cells to prevent the virus from infecting them are expected to remain effective. Okay, so when the virus evolve by accumulating mutations. Now, viruses evolving, viruses are accumulating mutations, antivirals become less effective because they target the pathogen but not the cell. Okay, so in this case, the host directed therapy, what happens that we develop immune response of the cell so that the cell itself deal with these viruses. Okay, so there is already enough evidence that the current FDA approved drugs for treating SARS-CoV-2 and influenza, they have developed the resistant. Okay, they are viruses infection. They are losing their efficacy because the emergence of drug-resistant virus strains. Okay, so since they are losing their efficacy, it is very important to develop alternatives like host-directed therapies, and this will provide us an opportunity to effectively tackle diseases like SARS-CoV-2 and influenza virus, and that will also reduce mortality rates. Okay, see, in host directed therapy, the challenge is that the molecules very often turn out to be toxic. Okay, so we have I have already told you that scientists have developed a few molecules, and these molecules are effective to deal with diseases caused by or pathogens of SARS-CoV-2 and influenza. However, these molecules very often develop toxic, okay, in the host cells, and when they turn into toxic, and that would be harmful for the host cell. So therefore, as of now, there is no approved host-directed therapies. However, scientists in their research, they have screened 28 molecules. Okay, so out of 28 molecules, one molecule is 1,3 di uh, diphenyl urea derivative. Okay, diphenyl urea derivative, and this was able to block SARS-CoV-2 and influenza virus infection 100% in cells without being toxic. Okay, so this diphenyl urea derivative, that is also known as DPUD, was able to block SARS-CoV-2 and influenza virus infections with 100% accuracy and without being toxic to the cells. Okay, now briefly we have to discuss what has been given in the newspaper. Okay, so this is a brief summary. Hope for the host directed therapy. Researchers from 4 Indian institutions, they find success in the host directed therapy against viruses. Okay, so host directed therapy is vastly different from the antivirals. Okay, because antivirals focuses on viruses, not cells. As of now, there is no approved direct host directed drugs available in either influenza for SARS-CoV-2 viruses. Why not available? Because these molecules may develop toxicity, or they may turn toxic in the host cells. Because of this reason, there are no approved host directed drugs. However, unlike the antivirals, they which focus on pathogens that become largely ineffective once the virus develops the drug resistance, drugs used in host directed therapy, this is HDT. Okay, HDT is host directed therapy. Host directed therapy remains efficient for a larger periods of time. However, small molecules developed are effective against both influenza and SARS-CoV-2, that has been revealed by the recent study and the research. Okay, so the viruses, while not being toxic to mice cells, so they are not just effective, but they are also not uh, toxic. Now, mice challenged with SARS-CoV-2 virus followed by a treatment using new molecules. So the new molecules were tested in a mice. Okay, so it had a better body weight recovery and improved lung pathology also. However, the influenza viruses have developed resistance to Tamiflu. Okay, Tamiflu is one of the drug which is used in the influenza diseases. Okay, so virus already developed, or pathogen already developed resistance to Tamiflu drug after its prolonged exposure. Okay, so when a drug is very often taken, then the pathogen will develop the resistance against such a drug. Okay, so after the prolonged exposure, the pathogen has developed resistance to Tamiflu. Now the virus has continued to remain sensitive to the new molecules. Okay, so next, the new molecules disturb the chloride equilibrium inside the cell, and thus affecting the chloride pathway used by the virus that enter the cells. And in this way, the host-directed therapy is more effective using molecules against SARS-CoV-2 and influenza viruses. Okay, so this is all about this article. So the next article is with respect to the polio disease. Okay, this is with respect to the polio disease. Now, what is a polio disease? So polio is actually caused by a virus. Okay, so it is caused by a virus. Now, polio is also called as poliomyelitis. It is highly infectious disease and it is caused by a virus called poliomyelitis virus. Okay, so this virus infects or invades the nervous system and it can also cause permanent paralysis among children. Okay, children are most vulnerable to polio disease. However, polio can spread through person to person through contact. Okay, so polio is a contagious disease and it can also spread through the community. Okay, so because it can spread through community and it can also spread to person contact, it has a significant health related consequences among the children. So most infected people around 90% of the people, they show no symptoms or they show a very mild symptoms. However, 1 in 200 infections who are infected with the polio leads to the permanent paralysis and they can't even move their body parts, and this also lead to even death. Okay, so this is about the polio. Please remember all these points. Now if you look at the timeline of polio in India in 1995 launched the pulse polio immunization program. Okay, so after that, in the year 2019, India accounted for nearly half of the total polio cases in the world. In the year 2011, the last case of polio was detected in India. So 2011 polio case was the last case that was detected in India. In the year 2012, World Health Organization World Health Organization declared India polio free. Okay, or World Health Organization removes India from the list of polio sorry endemic countries. In the year 2014, India achieves the polio free status. Okay, finally in the year 2014, India becomes the polio free or India achieves the polio free status. Now, please understand the timeline which is actually followed in India and the steps India has taken to achieve the polio free status. Okay, so in the year 1995, we already discussed this. 1995, the first national polio immunization campaign held. Okay, so since then, two national and multiple sub-national campaigns were rolled out every year. Okay, so if you look at the statistics or the data of the pulse polio campaign or the national polio campaign, around 2.3 million lakh vaccinators were vaccinated or deployed to vaccinate children at a large scale, and 1,55,000 supervisors were appointed to monitor the vaccination program and visit to 209 million households. Now, we should not forget the role of ASHAs, ANMs, and Anganwadi workers in making India polio free. So they have played a huge role in eradicating polio disease from India. Now, our childhood days, it is, the Pulse Polio campaign is very intensive, and every hospital, even the remote rural areas, also have access to the vaccine. So therefore, the success in terms of India becoming the polio free is primarily attributed to these grassroots level workers, ASHAs, ANM workers, and other Anganwadi workers. Okay, so they have played a huge role and a very critical role. So they have a huge potential in terms of the grassroots level healthcare, strengthening and improvement. But however, the problem is that their roles and their responsibilities are not duly recognized by the government. Still, they are paid with the honorary pay, but not regular salaries. So they do not have the transportation facilities, and they have to travel, to the remote areas without those areas lacking the transportation facilities. So therefore, ASHAs and ANNs and Anganwadi workers can ensure universal immunization in India. However, despite all these measures, polio is still poses a larger public health risk, because the polio virus transmission in neighboring countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan may have a spillover effects into India as well. So if you look at the timeline of polio in India, in the year 1970s, polio crippled an estimated 2 lakh children in India each year. Okay, each year around 2 lakh children are getting infected with polio. In the year 2009, India accounted for around 741 out of 1604 cases worldwide. Okay, so you can see the quantum of the cases. So more than half of the cases, right? So around half of the cases are from India alone, even in 2009. However, since 2009 to 2014, India had made a significant improvements in terms of polio vaccination. Okay, so because in the year 2014 January, the last case of polio in India was reported. That was in Howrah, West Bengal. In February 2014, India completed 3 full years without reporting any polio case or any new polio cases. And according to the World Health Organization, this will be the criteria to declare any nation as a polio free. And consequently, in the 2014, the same year, March, World Health Organization certified India and Southeast Asia region as polio free. Okay, so this is about the polio disease and the timeline of the polio disease in India. Now, so India's polio free journey, the impact of polio eradication efforts, particularly taken in India, extends far beyond. It is not just about eradicating polio, but it is about more than that. Okay, so earlier we have discussed the role of ASHAs, Anganwadi workers, and ANMs. Okay, so in the way that it extends beyond polio. So systems built to eradicate polio in India. There were several systems that were actually built in India to eradicate polio. So those systems include social mobilization. Okay, so a network of more than 7,000 community mobilizers. Community mobilizers include ANMs, ASHAs, and Anganwadi workers. Okay, so this is together known as social mobilization, a network of more than 7,000 community mobilizers, and immunization delivered to most remote areas thanks to 2.3 million health workers. Okay, so 2.3 million health workers delivered vaccines to remotest parts of India, whether it is northeast India or few parts in central India. So they have delivered these vaccines not just for polio, for other diseases also, to the remotest parts of India. And third aspect is surveillance. Around 33,000 reporting sites to identify new cases. Okay, so India acted swiftly, identifying new cases and delivering vaccines to the remotest parts with the help of health workers, and also appointing or recruiting the social or community mobilizers. So all these factors have given good dividends for India. Okay, so are now helping fight other diseases as well. So all these capabilities which India developed to fight the polio disease are now helping to tackle with other diseases like measles, diarrheal disease, chronic diseases, hepatitis B, and Japanese encephalitis as well. Now coming to this article, what this article has been discussing. So this is about in the year 1988, or since 1988, the World Health Assembly established Global Polio Eradication Initiative. Okay, so the World Health Assembly established the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. Okay, just remember this, and it was established in the year 1988. Now, the wild polio subtypes 2 and subtype 3 have been successfully eradicated. Now, entire world, throughout the world, the wild polio subtypes 2 and 3 were successfully eradicated. However, the number of wild polio virus cases across the world were also dropped to around 99 to 99.9 percentage. Okay, total wild polio virus cases were also dropped to 99.9 percentage. So, if you look at our neighboring countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan, today these are the only two countries where indigenous polio virus subtype 1 transmission continues uninterrupted. Okay, so across the world, the wild poliovirus subtype 2 and subtype 3 have been successfully eradicated. But on the other hand, Pakistan and Afghanistan are only two countries where indigenous wild poliovirus subtype 1 transmission continues uninterrupted. However, along with this, more worrying factor is that according to a morbidity and mortality report, MMWR, an increase in 23% of circulating vaccine derived polio viruses. Okay, so what is a circulating vaccine derived polio viruses? Now, the weakened the weakened polio virus is actually given as a vaccine. Okay, so weakened polio virus is actually given as a vaccine to children to tackle or combat the polio virus. Now it is not killed, it is still live attenuated, but weakened. But over a period of time, this virus may evolve. Okay, so this virus may take mutations, or it may result in mutations in the virus over a period of time or a prolonged period of time. So the evolving nature of these viruses, because they are not killed, they are live attenuated and weakened vaccines. So mutations and evolution of these viruses so may result in the birth of the polio, or may result in polio disease even in the vaccinated children. Okay, so there has been a 23% increase in circulating vaccine derived polio viruses. However, this is particularly concerning because the circulating vaccine derived polio virus have been reported from countries where polio viruses have long been eradicated, particularly the developed West countries like Canada, UK, US. So this is the reason why it is particularly concerning, because these circulating vaccine derived polio virus, the circulating vaccine derived polio vaccine is a weakened vaccine. Okay, this is a weakened vaccine and live attenuated vaccine, and this has been evolving and this has been undergoing mutations, and that has been resulting in disease. Okay, so that has been again becoming much more effective and potent to cause disease among already vaccinated individuals. Okay, and this has been particularly happening in countries like UK, US, Israel and Canada. Okay, so this is all about the polio virus, and also the steps or the measures India have already taken. India in the year 2014 March declared polio free by the World Health Organization. So however, please also remember that Afghanistan and Pakistan are the only countries in the world where indigenous subtype 1 of the polio virus has been the transmission has been taking place uninterrupted, right? So this is all about the polio virus. So the next article is with respect to the recent tussle between the union government and the Delhi government over the control over the bureaucrats. Okay, control over the bureaucrats in Delhi, right? So we have been discussing this since past 2 3 days about the union territory status of Delhi and the unique status of Delhi, and we also discussing about Article 239 AA, and this Article 239 AA mandates that the administrative matters should be referred to the lieutenant governor, and lieutenant governor can also reserve matters for the consideration of the president and act on the act as per the directions given by the president. Now in this scenario, the center has sought the review petition of recent Supreme Court judgment. Okay, so recently what Supreme Court has held, Supreme Court held that what Supreme Court has held now Supreme Court held that lieutenant governor is bound by the aid and advice of a council of ministers. Okay, so the issue is actually the bureaucrats, control over the bureaucrats. Okay, control over the bureaucrats. So center says that since the administration or the service rules are governed by the union government in the union territories, the bureaucrats are under the control of the central government. Okay. However, the argument of the Delhi government is that since it is an elected government, it also has certain extent executive and legislative powers. The bureaucrats should be accountable to the elected government in Delhi. However, the Supreme Court judgment says that the bureaucrats should be answerable or should be accountable to the elected government in Delhi. Okay, so if you look at the Supreme Court, a verdict, Supreme Court says that Lieutenant Governor is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Okay, so it also says that Lieutenant Governor does not have an independent decision making and he must act as per the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. And secondly, the minister's decisions must be communicated to the Lieutenant Governor. Okay, so but this does not mean that Lieutenant Governor's concurrence is required. So Lieutenant Governor must remember that it is the elected government that is answerable to the people. Okay, elected government must be answerable to the people. So this is actually the previous judgment. Okay, so this is a previous judgment about the tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and the Delhi government. But recent Constitution Bench verdict was in favor of the Delhi government. It says that the bureaucrats will be under control of the elected government in Delhi. Elected government in Delhi. Since they are elected government, they also enjoy the executive and legislative powers. And since the bureaucrats have to implement the policies of the Delhi government, the bureaucrats will be under the control of the Delhi government. Now, in order to challenge this judgment, the Supreme Court, the center has sought a review petition of this judgment. Okay. Now, sought the review of the Supreme Court verdict, and this verdict upholds Delhi government's power to make laws and wield control over the civil services. Okay, at the national capital territory of Delhi. Right. So the center said that the judgment by the Constitution Bench effect of declaring as a full-fledged state. Okay. So the judgment that was delivered by the Supreme Court is has an effect of Delhi as a full-fledged state, but not recognized Delhi as a union territory. Not recognized Delhi as a union territory. However, center says that union territories are not states; they are the territories of the union, and they falling outside the territory of states. Okay, center's argument is that union territories are actually the territories of the center, and they fall outside the jurisdiction or they fall outside the territories of states. And center has also argued that for a union territory, the parliament is the sole legislative body. So, if you look at this provision, Parliament has the authority. Parliament has the authority to make any law over Delhi. So, okay. So, whether it is a state list subject or concurrent list subject or the central list subject. Okay. So, along with the state legislative assembly of Delhi, Parliament also has enormous powers or all the powers over the Delhi. Okay. So, however, the Legislative Assembly of Delhi have powers with respect to state list and concurrent list only. The centre argued that for a union territory, the parliament is the sole legislative body. Okay. Now, so parliament is not just the sole legislative body, but state legislative assembly of Delhi. No, it is not, but union territory of Delhi also have this legislative assembly, and it can also make laws with respect to the subjects mentioned in the state list and the concurrent list. However, the judgment has accepted the superior legislative position of the parliament over Delhi, and it had gone on to recognize the extensive legislative and executive powers to Delhi Council that were given to the Council of Ministers and Legislative Assembly. The executive powers were given to the Delhi Council of Ministers, and the legislative powers were given to Legislative Assembly. Okay, so the other arguments of the center is that center under Article 309. Okay, please remember Article 309. So Article 309 of the Constitution clearly distinguishes between center and state services. Okay, there is a clear distinction between central services and state services. The civil services in India the civil services in Union Territory, they were clearly under, or they clearly belong to the center under Article 309 of the Constitution. And along with that, the appointments and the transfers are made in Delhi administration in accordance with the central recruitment rules. Okay, so these rules approved by the president through lieutenant governor under Article 309 of the Constitution. However, along with the above mentioned contentions, the judgment wholly ignores the nominee of the president, that is lieutenant governor, and also the central government. So central government says that the lieutenant governor and the central government are also manifestations of the democracy, but not the elected government in Delhi. Okay, so this is actually the center's view. Okay, center's view over the recent verdict of the Supreme Court over the control over the bureaucrats in Delhi. Okay, so therefore the center has seeks to review the Supreme Court's verdict on Delhi government powers. So yesterday also we have discussed that the center has passed an ordinance. Center has passed an ordinance and it has also appointed the Civil Services Authority. Okay, so Delhi Civil Services Authority. Now Delhi Civil Services Authority have three members. Three members. One Chief Minister of Delhi as the chairperson. And apart from the Chief Minister, Chief Secretary of the State and Home Secretary are the members. And the committee will decide the appointments. Okay, the committee will decide appointments and transfers. And once the committee decide the appointment and transfer, and they will be sent to the lieutenant governor. Okay, so finally lieutenant governor will take the ultimate decision. Okay, lieutenant governor will take the ultimate decision over the appointment or transfer of the bureaucrats. Okay, so again, despite being the Supreme Court's judgment over the appointment and transfer of bureaucrats, the center tried to uh, you know uh, uh, try to overtake the Supreme Court's judgment by this new ordinance. Okay, so this tussle will continue between Delhi government and the union government in the coming times as well. So next article is with respect to quad grouping. Okay, so quad, this is quadrilateral security dialogue. The member countries which are part of the quad grouping include India, USA, Israel, and this is not a United Arab Emirates. This is probably the Western Quad. Okay, this is probably the Western Quad. In West also we have formed a Western Quad. So in the Western Quad, United Arab Emirates is also part. So on the other hand, in the Indo-Pacific region, we have Quad grouping, and India is part of the Quad grouping. So apart from India and USA, Japan and Australia are also part of the Quad grouping in the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so they majorly discuss about the supply chain resilience, free, open, inclusive, rules-based Indo-Pacific, and also the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the Indo-Pacific region, and strengthening the maritime security. So all the aspects they deal with. So recently we yesterday also I have told that G7 summit was held in uh, Hiroshima, a Japanese city, Hiroshima. Okay. Now, on the sidelines of the G7 summit, the Quad member countries, that is India, Japan, Australia, and USA. So they have met in Hiroshima and they have discussed a wide variety of issues. Okay, right from the Russia-Ukraine war and the supply chain resilience and the debt trap by China, etc. Now, in this case, we need to understand, so Quad, what is Quad? Quad is a quadrilateral security dialogue. So this is a quadrilateral security dialogue or Quad. It is an informal strategic forum between countries of Australia, India, Japan, and United States. Okay, so if you look at the origin of the Quad, the forum was initiated a dialogue. So okay, so first it was initiated as a dialogue in the year 2007 by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Okay, so it was first initiated as a dialogue in the year 2017 by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Okay, so particularly on Japan on seas of freedom and prosperity, particularly in the backdrop of Chinese assertiveness and belligerence in the Indo-Pacific region. Because, in fact, Japan and China also have disputes over the islands, the Senkaku Islands. Okay, so therefore, Japan has initiated this dialogue, or the maritime dialogue, Seas of Freedom and Prosperity. So the dialogue was strengthened by signing of the Japan-Australia Joint Declaration and Joint Declaration on Security Cooperation and Joint Military Exercises. The joint military exercises were conducted between United States, India, Japan, Australia. And the name of these joint exercises is Malabar Exercise. Okay. Now, what is the significance of the Quad grouping? The Quad will create a mechanism. Okay. So this mechanism will ensure free and secure Indo-Pacific region. Next, the second objective or the second important aspect of the Quad is it will challenge the Chinese hegemony and expansionism along with, uh, you know, uh, the assertiveness and the belligerence of China in the Indo-Pacific region, because that has threatened several small nations. If you look at the overall map of China and its neighboring countries, China has, illegal claims over South China Sea. Okay, South China Sea. So apart from South China Sea, China also have disputes with India, Russia, Japan, South Korea. So okay, so therefore Chinese assertiveness has created several challenges in the region, and Quad grouping will indirectly help tackle those challenges. And this Quad grouping will also create a group and that will promote democratic ideals. Okay, and it will also uphold international rules and rules based international order. Fourth and final objective is that Chinese aggressive policies in the Himalayan region as well as South China Sea can be countered through a grouping such as Quad. Okay, so in recent times, the conflict or the standoff at the line of actual control between India and China have also been increasing, and India's membership in Quad will help. Uh, you know, the other countries will lend support to India. Now, what are the goals of the Quad grouping? The goals of the Quad grouping include diplomatic and military arrangement is widely viewed as a response to increased Chinese economic and military power. Okay, so the concerns with respect to the Quad is China has criticized the Quad grouping as Asian NATO. It is also termed as a challenge to its influence in the region. So the second concern is constitution of Quad can militarize the Indo-Pacific region and bringing in fresh instability into the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so this is all about Quad, its origin, significance, goals, and concern. Now, what this article has been talking about. So we already discussed that on the sidelines of the G7 summit, all the leaders of the Quad grouping have met and they have discussed a wide variety of issues. Okay, so the Quad Summit of India, Japan, US, Australia that was held in Hiroshima on Saturday. Okay, so the leaders of the Quad grouping, the four countries, so they recommitted themselves for maintaining and strengthening stability in the Indo-Pacific region according to the international law. So they committed themselves for maintaining stability, peace, and ensuring the prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Okay, so they also committed themselves to tackle any challenges posed by Chinese assertiveness or aggression in the Indo-Pacific region. So they also committed to continue to provide humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. So apart from this, Quad principles were also accepted, and these principles, particularly on clean energy supply chains, cybersecurity and secure softwares, and critical and emerging technology standards. So these principles were also agreed by the Quad member countries. And Quad member countries also recognizes serious impacts on global economic system due to Russia-Ukraine war. Because due to Russia-Ukraine war, across the world there has been a fuel security issues, food security, and fertilizer security issues, and global south developed and least developing countries were the actually the worst impacted countries. Okay, Quad countries are also rightly recognize the impact of the war on food security, fuel security, and fertilizer security. Now, how Quad grouping will benefit India? So, what are the key takeaways for India? Okay, so if you look at, we already know that the member countries of Quad grouping, they include Japan, Australia, USA plus India. Okay, so all these countries are economic superpower. Okay, so Japan, Australia, USA, they have the economic superiority and they can invest in infrastructure projects in India, and that will help India to upgrade its infrastructure, and that will also help India to maintain the supply chain resilience and expand its influence beyond the region. So if you look at it, the Indo-Pacific Partnership on Maritime Domain Awareness was launched as part of the Quad. So okay, so this is the first key takeaway. And secondly, sharing of space-based civil Earth observation data, the Quad satellite data portal was also launched. Okay, so there will be convergence of the space based capabilities and the that data that has been available. Condemnation of 26 by 11 Mumbai and Pathankot attacks by Pak based terrorist groups, and Quad also has an agenda against terrorism. Okay, so India uh, is generally known for fighting against terrorism. So therefore, Quad member countries supporting India's efforts against terrorism, definitely a positive thing for us. And fourth, Quad debt management resource portal. So this will help the countries which are under the crisis, which are facing huge debt. For example, because of the debt trap diplomacy of China and unsustainable loans being given by the China. And the fifth thing is that capacity building under the Quad Cybersecurity Partnership, and this was first ever Quad Cybersecurity Day. Okay, so on the first ever Quad Cybersecurity Day, the capacity building under Quad Cybersecurity Partnership will be taken up, and fellowships in science, technology, engineering, and medicine. So varsities in US for 25 students from each Quad country. Okay, fellowships will be given in these STEM varsities for 25 students from each of these countries. Now, if you look at India and the Japan cooperation individually, a reviewed progress on Mumbai and Ahmedabad speed rail project, and that was taken up with the help of Japan, the bullet train project. And India and Japan were also signed the third tranche of loan project. Okay, so the third tranche of loan project being given by Japan to India. And third, the quarantine free entry into the Japan for Indians carrying Covaxin or Covishield. So this is with respect to uh, you know workforce, the free movement of workforce between these countries. And Modi, so this is with respect to India and USA cooperation. So both sides announced major partnerships boost cooperation in critical and emerging technologies. So these technologies, include security, trade, defense, space, etc. And USA also announced India joining the combined military forces, Bahrain as its association member. Okay, so India's cooperation with the US will help us, developing our capacities, strengthening our capacities in defense, trade, space, technology, education, culture, etc. Wide variety of areas. And India and Australia, a comprehensive strategic partnership. So India and Australia also recently signed a free trade agreement. Okay, so apart from this, India and USA also have a comprehensive strategic partnership, and that includes trade, investment, defense, manufacturing, renewable energy, and including hydrogen, education, science, technology, and agricultural research and sports. Okay, so these are all the key takeaways for India from the Quad grouping. Okay, so this will also benefit in a wide variety of ways. We have already discussed the concerns with respect to the Quad. Okay, However, when it comes to particularly about India, India has been maintaining a close ties, traditionally maintaining a close ties with Russia, and it is also dependent on its defense supplies on Russia. However, Russia also have the same view like China on the Quad grouping, okay, militarization of the Indo-Pacific region. In fact, China and Russia don't accept the view that it is an Indo-Pacific. They still look the region as Asia Pacific. Okay, they still consider the region as Asia Pacific. So this is all about the Quad grouping. I've given you all the details regarding the Quad grouping, when it was formed, and how it will help India. Now, the next article is about the OTT platforms. Okay, this is with respect to the OTT platforms. So, OTT platforms are the over the top platforms. They include Netflix, Amazon, etc., and several Indian platforms as well. So, these platforms are regulated by the IT rules which were introduced in the year 2021. Okay, so IT rules, digital media ethics and guidelines 2021. So this article is about the OTT despite IT rules mandating that the OTT platforms should make their services more and more accessible to the people with visually and hearing uh, impairment, but over the top platforms are not actually complying with these norms, right? So despite boom in over the top streaming services, so the boom has taken place particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so despite a boom in the over the top streaming services in India, there is a huge gap in accessibility of content for visually and hearing challenged viewers. Okay, however, the regulations with respect to streaming in India, they explicitly recommend that streaming services make an effort. They should make an effort to have their content accessible for visually impaired and hearing challenged viewers. Okay, so one aspect which has been mentioned in the IT rules 2021 is that has not received much attention or complaints is their pitch for accessibility for persons with disabilities. Okay, so this, even though this is mentioned as part of the IT rules 2021, that has not received much attention or much complaints from the OTT platforms. Okay, so that is with respect to the IT rules pitch for accessibility of persons with disabilities. However, the final provision of the Code of Ethics that was formulated in the year 2021, that says that OTT platforms have to adhere to. Okay, so is a nudge to take a reasonable efforts to improve accessibility of online curated content. Okay, now it is the content is transmitted by it to persons with disabilities through implementation of appropriate access services. Now, what are the appropriate access services? So, appropriate access services include these two technologies. One is closed captioning and audio description technology, and the second technology is audio description tracks. Now, the closed captioning and audio description particularly focuses on hearing impaired individuals. Okay, so this closed captioning, unlike regular subtitling, this describes sounds and background music score in a film or TV show for people who have the difficulty in hearing. Secondly, audio description tracks. So it describes what is happening on screen for visually challenged audiences. Okay, so the IT rules particularly mandates that there should be adoption of such technologies so that these content which is in the OTT platforms will also be accessible for disabled individuals or Divyangjans. Okay, so the technologies include both closed captioning and audio description and also audio description tracks. However, the IT rules code of ethics pushes for these technologies to be more widely adopted. Okay, IT rules 2021. So it actually pushes for these technologies to be more widely adopted by all the OTT platforms or streaming services, especially those run by Indian firms. However, Indian films have not adopted such technologies, and the best example is lack of captioning on Indian Premier League by Geo Cinema. Okay, so there is no such complaints by even Geo Cinema, that is an Indian firm. Finally, there is a better accessibility. For example, international platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV Plus, they are far better. Okay, or they fare better. How they fare better? Because there was an agreement, American Council of the Blind Agreement 2016 between Netflix and American Council of the Blind. Okay, so after this agreement, Netflix started adding an audio description track for its original content. Okay, for all its original content globally and including India. However, despite they are following, but it is not up to the mark. Okay, so they are not completely focusing on technologies that will make content accessible to the disabled individuals. Okay, this is all about the OTT platforms, IT rules, and OTT platforms not making the content accessible to the disabled people, and thereby violating the IT rules of 2021. The next article is with respect to the contract where president is a party. Okay, for example, in a case of overall India, the president is a party to a contract. Okay, so with respect to state, governor is a party to the contract. So there was a judgment by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says there is no immunity for president as a contract party. Okay, so Supreme Court rules government cannot claim immunity from the application of law. Okay, so the government cannot claim the immunity from application of law to a contract merely because president is one party. President is one party. Now, this judgment comes on a time a petition filed by Austrian pistol maker Glock Asia Pacific. Okay, so this Glock Asia Pacific has filed a petition in the Supreme Court. Okay, so why this Glock Asia Pacific filed a petition in Supreme Court? It is the petition is against the union government over the appointment of an arbitrator to a regular or to a dispute regulating a tender. Now, in this case, the arbitrator appointed by the union government is from the union Ministry of Law. Okay, so an officer from the Ministry of Law. However, the Supreme Court says that the arbiter should be independent and impartial. He should not be related to the either party. Okay, so therefore it is a violation of the contract law. Okay, it is a violation of section 12(5) of the Act. Arbitration Act. However, union government claims that it is an exception because since the president is a party to this agreement or party to this contract, there is no need for appointing an independent or an impartial arbitrator. Okay, now if you look into the details of this issue, the Supreme Court has held that the government cannot claim immunity from the application of law to a contract merely because one of the parties to the contract is President of India. Okay, so since one of the party to a contract is president, the government cannot claim the immunity from the application of law. And Supreme Court also has the clear opinion that the contract entered in the name of President of India. Okay, and it cannot and will not create an immunity against application of any statutory prescriptions imposing conditions on parties to the agreement. Okay, however, so when the government chooses to enter into a contract and the contract is taken in the name of the president, okay, contract is taken in the name of the president, and even though it is taken in the name of the president will not enjoy or the contract will not enjoy any immunity from the law, right? So any immunity from the law. So apart from that, the Supreme Court also says that so when tasked with a job to find an arbitrator, the state should ensure that the person it chooses is impartial, independent adjudicator with no professional ties to either of the party. Okay, the arbiter should be independent, impartial, and he should not have ties with any of the party. Okay, so the judgment came with respect to a petition filed by Globe Asia Pacific Limited, and it was against union regarding appointment of an arbiter. Since the arbiter is from the law ministry, an officer from the law ministry, he has ties with the government. The Globe Asia Pacific filed a petition in the Supreme Court. Okay, so the Globe appealed against an arbitration clause in the agreement. That arbitration clause enabled the Home Secretary to appoint an officer in the Ministry of Law to be the sole arbitrator. Okay, so the government says that the clause was clear violation of the Section 12(5) of the Arbitration Act. If we appoint a law of an officer under Ministry of Law, that amounts to a clear violation of Section 12(5) of the Arbitration Act. Okay, so in fact, Article 299 says about the contracts made by the union and state in the name of president and governor. Okay, so the contract entered into the name of the president can enjoy immunity. So Article 299, contracts made in the name of union or state in the name of president or governor of the constitution does not give the government power to break a statutory law. So this is actually the observation of the Supreme Court. Now the next article is Himachal Pradesh exploring the possibility of growing cannabis in a state. Now cannabis is a narcotic drug. Okay, cannabis is a narcotic drug plant. So along with the narcotics or side effects of cultivating the cannabis is illegally cultivated in several parts of India. However, few states have legalized the cultivation of cannabis, like Uttarakhand, and also Uttar Pradesh. So they have legalized the cultivation of cannabis. Okay, because cannabis have huge industrial and healthcare or medicinal uses. Healthcare or medicinal uses. So if you look at these things, industrial uses of cannabis, this is used in production of fiber boards and furniture items. And the hemp of the cannabis fiber will be used in fabrics and textiles, and the hemp seed and oil cake used in a range of foods and beverages. So the part of hemp, that is herds, are used in animal bedding, material inputs, paper making, oil absorbents, and ethanol. So these are the industrial applications of or industrial uses of cannabis. And secondly, it also has a wide variety of medicinal uses. It includes the appetite stimulation in people with HIV/AIDS infection. Secondly, effective medicine in case of chronic pain. Third, effective in reducing neuropathic pain. And fourth, reduce cancer growth or migration of cancer cells in body. Okay, so these are all the applications, both medicinal and industrial uses. Since it has a huge industrial properties, medicinal properties, the Himachal Pradesh government has also been thinking over an idea of making cannabis cultivation legal. Okay, cannabis cultivation in legal, and it will be under state's regulation. Okay, because it has a huge revenue generating potential in the hilly state of Himachal Pradesh, and it will also support the livelihoods of the farmers. So therefore the Himachal Pradesh government has appointed a ministerial committee. Okay, it has appointed a ministerial committee to study the feasibility of cultivation of cannabis and the advantages the state will have because of its huge medicinal uses and also industrial properties. Okay, so with this we have discussed all the important and relevant news articles given in the today's newspaper. Okay, so thank you.